basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable when I'm forced to the field. Word life. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable when I'm forced to the field.
Time and time again, we hear John Cena described as one of the most polarizing superstars in WWE history. Many wrestling fans had a tough time accepting John as the number one guy during his tenure within WWE. Old school fans didn't care much for John, but at the same time, the younger fans, the new generation of fans, they couldn't get enough of Cena. This created a dilemma in wrestling arenas where John could either get loudly cheered by the audience, or he could get ripped apart by fans in attendance. Many wrestling fans also felt that John's in-ring abilities left a lot to be desired, and then there were many that felt that John was handed the keys to the kingdom without proving himself. To his credit, John Cena didn't let his critics dictate his path, and while it would have been interesting to see how a full-blown John Cena heel turn would have played out in the final years of his full-time run, John stuck to his guns and he continued to do his thing. John Cena refused to let down his fan base. Something that John should also get credit for is his incredible work ethic. 2,247 matches have been recorded for John Cena throughout his whole career that began in late 1999. When comparing to others, John Cena has had more matches than Hulk Hogan, more than Randy Savage, more than Shawn Michaels, and more than Stone Cold Steve Austin, respectively. Of course, there are variables at play here that can also determine how many career matches a wrestler has. Simply put, the WWE put on more matches during Cena's era in comparison to Hogan's, but the fact still remains that John Cena worked extremely hard during his career, especially when he was the number one guy. You've seen me use cagematch.net before as a reference tool during other videos, and looking at John Cena's match record is really like nothing I've ever seen before. These are consistent upper card matches at a consistent rate, and if John wasn't on TV, he could be found working dark matches. I'll be honest, I was never the biggest John Cena fan. I was the total opposite, and I know that the vast majority of people who watch my videos are from the same era of wrestling fandom that I am, and they too won't be huge supporters of Cena, but I simply can't look over John's schedule without respecting his persistence. So how did it all begin for John Cena, and where did this work ethic come from? Let's start at the beginning. John Cena was born in West Newbury, Massachusetts on April 23rd, 1977. He would go on to attend Springfield College, where he was an NCAA Division III All-American Center for the college football team, wearing the number 54. You may have seen the number 54 on John's merchandise. A lot of John's work ethic came from his days playing college football. His teammates talk about how he was the first and last man on the field, and how John was a natural born leader in the locker room. John graduated with a degree in exercise physiology, and John left college wanting to become a bodybuilder. John told his dad that he wanted to go to California, where there would be more opportunities and bodybuilding competitions that John could focus on. And while working out inside a Gold's Gym, Cena was approached by Mike Bell. Mike Bell was the guy who Perry Saturn attacked in a WWE ring after a botched arm drag, by the way, just in case the name rings a bell. Bell recommended Ultimate Pro Wrestling to John Cena, an independent promotion that also served as a WWE developmental territory at the time, and John decided to visit UPW to see if he could potentially make it in the wrestling business. Cena told his dad that as soon as he stepped into a wrestling ring, he knew that's where he wanted to be. Christopher Daniels has been credited as the man who trained John initially, but the details here are very vague. The WWE, of course, would like you to believe that all of John's training began in Ohio Valley Wrestling, but this simply isn't true. Tapes exist online that show John Cena participating in a wrestling training video alongside Daniels, Samoa Joe and Frankie Kazarian. Cena would stay in the UPW for around a year and a half. Jim Ross has taken credit for bringing John Cena from UPW to Ohio Valley Wrestling, the WWE's main developmental territory and the place where wrestlers were specifically trained for a potential WWE debut. Jim Ross said, "I heard about John when he was the Prototype wrestling in the UPW organization in Southern California. I'd received a tape of John's work. You could see the guy had a great physique, was athletic and had a strong work ethic. So I flew to California, I went to a UPW live event, and then I met with John after the event. I remember coming back to Stamford and going into Vince McMahon's office. I told him, I've just signed your main event for WrestleMania in 5 years. I was very excited about what I saw, and I was more excited about the person I met. The athlete I saw was very raw, very green, and very unrefined. The man I met was very mature, really classy. He had a great work ethic and a great motor." Bruce Pritchard said on his podcast that Rick Bassman, the head of UPW, had introduced him to John Cena before Jim Ross scouted the Prototype. Unaware that Cena competed in bodybuilding tournaments, Pritchard told Cena that if he ever wants to make it in the business, he had to get off the gas. Pritchard then walked away from Cena without allowing John to answer back. Granted, anyone looking at John Cena would immediately think that John was on the juice, but this wasn't the case. John's first tests within WWE came back clean as a whistle. So what happened here really was Bruce Pritchard made an assumption and he failed to sign a future megastar within the world of wrestling. Funny how things work out. Still, John was on the right path after getting signed by Jim Ross. He now had to put the work in over at Ohio Valley Wrestling. So in 2001, John had signed a true WWE developmental deal and he'd be going to Ohio Valley Wrestling in hopes of making it to the big time. John was bringing over his Prototype gimmick, an engineered genius that was 50% man, 50% machine, and 100% mayhem. The Prototype character was developed in UPW, and Ohio Valley Wrestling head honchos Danny Davis and Jim Cornette felt that the Prototype could fit well into the OVW roster at the time. Among John Cena's peers in Ohio Valley Wrestling were Shelton Benjamin, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, and Dave Batista, a stellar roster of superstars who would go on to do big things in the WWE. While researching this period of John Cena's career, something I read over and over again is that while many of the WWE higher-ups felt that John Cena was willing to learn, he was still extremely green. WWE superstars who travelled to Ohio Valley Wrestling would say that John was a respectful guy, he had a great personality and a great sense of humour, but inside the ring he still needed a lot of refinement, and many questioned if John could truly make it to the big time. What Cena lacked in-ring ability though, he made up for it with his look and his promos. Danny Davis was enamoured by Cena's mic work and John's ability to think fast during interviews. As a character, John was probably leagues above everyone else in Ohio Valley Wrestling, but in order to improve in the ring, John would have to stay in developmental for well over a year. Brian Gewart said that the WWE stumbled upon John Cena by accident while studying OVW tapes. Brian said that the company was looking at Rico, John Cena's tag team partner at the time, but this completely contradicts Jim Ross's statement earlier, and it also contradicts Cena's match history. If you look here, John already had dark matches in the WWE even before Ohio Valley Wrestling. I think this was likely just a bad choice of words from Brian. Jim Ross certainly knew who John Cena was, and I think while Brian and company were watching these tapes of Rico, they noticed John putting in some excellent promo work, and this made the WWE take notice of the Prototype. By doing things like the backwards promo, John Cena got noticed by the decision makers in Stamford. It wasn't John's in-ring abilities that got him called up, it was his natural charisma. Over on the WWE, Vince McMahon was trying to usher in a new era that was based around the term Ruthless Aggression. Vince wanted his roster to rise up. He was willing to give his superstars a chance to become megastars, but in order to do so, they would have to show Ruthless Aggression. While Ruthless Aggression worked as an era tagline that would do well with marketing, Vince McMahon has gone on record saying that he himself has acted with Ruthless Aggression in mind, and this is what brought him success on many occasions. Still, the term was used in promos and in commentary. Who was going to step up and show enough ruthless aggression to become the number one guy in all of wrestling? As time went on, ruthless aggression became an era in wrestling that gets labelled the same way as the Attitude Era. And really, I think this is what the WWE were going for all along. They tried to usher in eras afterwards, such as the Reality Era that Triple H and the Authority tried to bring in, and that didn't work out nearly as good. Anyway, I'm going over this because John Cena would make his WWE debut immediately after Vince McMahon's infamous promo where he challenged his roster to show ruthless aggression. Cena said he saw the promo and it truly resonated with him. It affected him in a way that he felt he had to go out on SmackDown and prove that he's going to be the next big megastar to come out of the WWE. John had worked quite a few WWE house shows and dark matches as the Prototype before making his SmackDown debut. While walking around backstage, Vince McMahon had no idea who John Cena was, and Vince McMahon told Bruce Pritchard that he wants Cena removed from the backstage area. Vince took one look at John Cena and he thought that John wouldn't be passing any wellness tests anytime soon, and Vince didn't want to be associated with guys who looked the way John Cena did. Don't let the irony of this escape you, by the way. Pritchard explained that this was the WWE's latest signing and his tests all came back clean. This gave Vince a little more confidence, but still, Vince McMahon was not enamoured by John Cena at all when it came to his in-ring abilities. Both Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard didn't like the Prototype gimmick. They felt it was hokey, and again, don't let the irony of this escape you either. Along with the gimmick, Vince also felt that Cena was a little clumsy in the ring and he was still very green. Little by little, Cena's personality and drive would come through at the right times. Cena's attitude towards his work and his willingness to learn was really what got Cena on the TV. Plus, he would debut on SmackDown, a taped show where his matches could be edited or even redone if things went really bad. John had worked on Velocity, Jacked and Sunday Night Heat, so he knew his way around a WWE ring. It was now time to sink or swim. Cena said that he got his debut bout against Kurt Angle on SmackDown because there was no one else available to do the match. Bruce Pritchard apparently told Cena that if he can hang with Kurt Angle, then he could hang with anybody. Pritchard told Cena to go see Vince McMahon before the match, and Vince told Cena that he has to go and get his hair cut before going out on TV. Cena obliged, so the very first job Cena ever got from Vince was to go and get a trim. Kurt Angle came out to the ring on the June 27th, 2002 episode of SmackDown after being introduced by Mr. McMahon himself. Kurt bragged about defeating Hulk Hogan at the King of the Ring, and because the fans were mocking Angle for being bald, Kurt decided to remove his headgear and his wig to embrace the baldness. Naming himself the poster boy for Ruthless Aggression, Kurt let out an open challenge. Anyone who Kurt hadn't wrestled before was welcome to come to the ring and try their luck against the Olympic gold medalist. Out walks John Cena, somehow managing to look both nervous and intense at the same time. Kurt asks for this newcomer's name. John says, "I'm John Cena." So the Prototype gimmick was now completely gone. Kurt then asks what is the one quality that Cena possesses that makes him think he can walk to the ring and stand face to face with the best in the business. John Cena famously answers the question with two words: Ruthless Aggression, before slapping Angle in the face. The crowd went nuts for Cena, but keep in mind they also witnessed Kurt Angle defeating Hulk Hogan on pay-per-view. Kurt had also ripped the audience apart before Cena came to the ring, so fans probably would have cheered for anyone here who stepped up to the challenge. Still, the timing was right. John got a good crowd ovation by design as he brought the fight to Angle. As the match went on though, you could tell that Cena was inexperienced. There's something about the way he moved that wasn't very graceful, and things seemed a little over-exaggerated. Cena was allowed to get in a ton of offense though. The story here was that Cena gave Kurt Angle a real run for his money, but in the end, the Olympic gold medalist came out on top. Kurt Angle also refused to shake Cena's hand afterwards. Angle looked at John Cena like he was a complete idiot before leaving the ring. Now, to give Cena his props, he was in the ring with Kurt Angle on his debut night, and he did did hang in there. Angle is widely considered as one of the absolute best, and Kurt Angle also liked to test his opponent's stamina. Angle admitted to trying to blow up Cena in this debut match, but Cena kept coming back for more. So even though it wasn't the greatest debut of all time, Cena still got put through a non-stop match, and he came out of it looking like he could still go. While on the surface fans could see this as an impressive debut, there were also a lot of problems with it, and one of the main problems, in my opinion, was the lack of character that John Cena now possessed. It was the Prototype's gimmick and the Prototype's promos that caught the WWE's attention, and it was John Cena, the human being that Jim Ross was fond of when Cena got signed to his OVW contract. You can put two and two together here and arrive at the conclusion that Vince McMahon and maybe Bruce Pritchard were responsible for stripping Cena of the Prototype gimmick, and really what we have left was just another plain wrestler. John walked out on this episode of SmackDown looking like nothing more than a body guy, and the handshake business afterwards was one of those white meat babyface things that fans just couldn't care about in 2002. Cena may have gave Angle a run for his money, but there was nothing else there in terms of a gimmick, a character and a personality. As previously mentioned, John didn't really set the world on fire either with his in-ring abilities, and John Cena himself will be the first person to admit that his WWE debut was underwhelming. We'll come back to this in a moment though. After the Angle match, the WWE tried to legitimize John Cena by having other superstars endorse him backstage. Even The Undertaker shook Cena's hand after telling John that he'd done a good job. John Cena would begin a rivalry with Chris Jericho that would eventually lead to Cena's first pay-per-view match at Vengeance 2002. During this time frame, Cena's character didn't evolve. He changed the colour of his trunks to match the local sports team. He went out with a positive attitude, smiling for fans, being a go-getter, all that stuff, and it was all very, very vanilla. Cena was failing to connect with the audience, and he began to slowly fall by the wayside. Within a short period of time, Cena found himself on the Velocity program, wrestling meaningless matches while still trying to figure out who he was and what he was supposed to do. John Cena said, "The fans who like to look at the Ruthless Aggression John Cena and who look back on that as a success, they're not looking back at it correctly. It was a failure. The WWE used to make a series of cuts around late November and mid-May, and I was told I would be getting my release in the Christmas cuts because it just wasn't working. There's no argument there, they gave me it on a silver platter. John Cena, Ruthless Aggression, and I failed. I messed it up." John said he was on what he felt was his last European tour, working a series of mixed tag matches. John said he was on one of the final bus journeys of the tour where guys like Rey Mysterio and Rikishi were freestyle rapping. John went over and he joined in, and Cena made the boys pop. John's ability to think fast translated well into his rapping, and the rest of the bus couldn't believe how good Cena was. Stephanie McMahon asked Cena how did he remember all of his lines, and Stephanie couldn't believe that Cena had made everything up on the spot. John said that Stephanie challenged him to do it again the following week, and to prove he was thinking on his feet, John rapped about the can of tuna that Stephanie was eating and the destination of their next live event, things like that. John was asked if he could freestyle rap on WWE television. John said yes, he would love to give it a chance. So now John Cena had been given a second sink or swim moment within WWE. The Halloween episode of SmackDown in 2002 is where John Cena got to show off his rapping abilities for the very first time. During Stephanie McMahon's Halloween party, Cena dressed up like Vanilla Ice, and Cena got the chance to rap in two separate segments. The next week on SmackDown, Cena was still in his old ring gear, but he performed another freestyle rap, this time during a backstage interview with Funaki. By the 21st of November, Cena had his entrance video video and entrance music changed into something that suited this new character a little more, but that ring attire still had to go. Bull Buchanan was then paired up with Cena. Bull changed his name to B Squared, and then on the 12th of December episode of SmackDown, John Cena came out to the ring wearing gear that suited this new character much more. I should also point out here that this gimmick was not supposed to be taken seriously at all at first. Cena and B Squared's opponents would laugh at these two wannabe rappers walking to the ring. Even Michael Cole and Taz made fun of Cena and Buchanan during their matches on commentary. The thing is though, John Cena was getting over with his freestyle raps, many of which were quite R-rated and many of which were actually quite funny. But this is where we end today's video because the Doctor of Thugonomics had arrived, and well, you know how I like to put these videos together. John Cena's Thugonomics days will get covered in depth with future uploads. If there's any takeaway from this video though, I guess it would be centered around how opportunities can arrive in wrestling when a guy tries something different. If Cena didn't join in with Rikishi and Rey Mysterio on that European tour bus, then the whole future of the WWE would have looked very different. Whether you love the guy or hate the guy though, you have to appreciate his story. As corny as the line "never give up" truly is, John really didn't give up, even when guys were telling him he was too green, and when the bigwigs in the WWE hated the thing that brought him to the dance in the first place. Cena's story in wrestling is intriguing though, and how the fans reacted to Cena over the years is even more fascinating, and you can bet that I'll be looking into John's career a lot more in the coming months. Thanks for watching and take care.
So, you think you're untouchable?
Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable when I'm forced to the field. Word life. This is basic thugonomics.